Now we can officially start. Alrighty, welcome everybody to our virtual introduction to the Great Backyard Bird Count for 2021. It's a really, really great citizen science project, and we're excited to bring it to you along with some of the interesting things and ways that it's changing with COVID and the pandemic. So going to have a really, really lovely night. If you have not already done so, I highly recommend everyone, come out on Saturday at 2 o'clock and join us for an in-person hike as well. It should be hopefully a lovely day. We'll cross our fingers. So, and hopefully we'll see some birds. Although I think it might be now that I think about it, I think it's actually supposed to snow, but that's okay. We'll make do. If a couple other things, if you are not already signed up, we are doing a lunch and learn series all about birds on Wednesdays at noon. We're about halfway through our bird series right now. I think the one this coming week is all about gardening for birds, including a lot about native plants. The week after that, we're talking about pesticides in birds and how they impact insect populations. And how the impacts on the insect populations impact the birds. We're doing one on window collisions. We're doing one on the impact of cats on birds. So some really interesting programs coming up with that. And then we're actually in the process right now of putting together our spring lunch and learn, which is actually going to be all about really, really cool different citizen science projects that you can get involved with, whether through Audubon or through, or just right in your own backyard, things that you can do right at home. So lots of exciting things coming up. And next month, we are going to also be doing our frog walk, similar to how we're doing the format with this program. We'll do a virtual frog walk on March the 25th. And then we will be doing, on the 27th, we'll be doing an in-person frog walk and taking people out to see what frogs are out nice and early. Hopefully we'll have good weather and there'll be lots of them out with us. So definitely join us for all of those upcoming programs. I am now going to turn this over to Diane Smith, our Director of Education and our resident bird expert, because that is definitely not me. So Diane, go ahead and take it away.
All right, well, thanks everybody for joining. The Great Backyard Bird Count is one of the first community science projects that I ever started to participate in, and it's still one of my favorites because it's just a fun thing to do. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and do a little slide presentation, and we'll get going. If I can find the one I want. Here's the one. All right. That's not what I wanted to do. So can you guys still hear me? Can you hear me, Stacy?
Yes, we can hear you.
Good, because I forgot to click share computer sound and I wasn't sure if that would make a difference. All right,
no, it just means we won't be able to hear if you have any videos or sounds in the presentation.
No, I don't have any of those, not this time.
Okay.
All right, so welcome to the presentation on the Great Backyard Bird Count for this year. It starts tomorrow and goes for 4 days. It's a joint project with the Cornell Lab of Ornithology and National Audubon, as well as our partner in Canada, which is Birds Canada. The website for the event is birdcount.org. It's global. When we first started out with the Great Backyard Bird Count, it was just North America, and then it expanded to be part of North and South America, and now it has gone global. It's a part of Ebird, which is an online checklist program, and anybody with an internet connection anywhere in the world can take part, even on your phone, if that's the way you like to bird. All ages, all skill levels are welcome. If you can identify one bird, you're more than welcome to join in the Great Backyard Bird Count. I don't know how many of you are familiar with Ebird, but it is a terrific program. It's the way that we do the data entry for the scientists. And there's a course that they have, which is free, called Ebird's Essentials, which will take you through how to use the program. Makes it so that you can figure out how to get your location, how to report species, how to share findings. And it's just, you can just put in your browser Ebird Essentials and it'll take you right to it and you can learn it. All right, so even though we call it the Great Backyard Bird Count, it is open to count from anywhere. You can count from your cities, you can count from your backyards, you can count from nature centers like us. So we encourage everyone to count birds wherever you are. Birds are everywhere and we want to count all of them. All right. In addition to letting your birds get counted, you can also find out what else is going on all over the world. You can't just, you don't have to just worry about your birds, but you can see where other people are counting. You can make long-term lists of your birds. And we do this because scientists, can't be everywhere at all times. So what we want to do is provide as much data to the scientists at Cornell and Audubon to keep track of what's going on in the world of birds. And it's just a lot of fun. One of the things I like about the Great Backyard Bird Count is, you can sit in your kitchen and with your cup of coffee or cup of tea and look out your window and at your bird feeders and count them. And it's just as valuable to the science as, hiking into the depths of the woods and looking for birds there. So there's some interesting pictures of birds. We've got harriers and other birds. And the fact of, using your eBird account, it will keep your lists for you. You don't have to check off the list in the back of your bird book anymore. It'll keep track of it. And you can go back and you can look. You can also go back and edit things if you learned something or you forgot something. You can even enter historical data that you've collected in the past. So eBird is not just for the Great Backyard Bird Count, but it's also useful, all year round. Some of the things that the scientists can learn from these activities: migration patterns, year-to-year changes, what's going on with trends long term. So one of some of the things that have come up, using this kind of data is looking at the way ranges have been shifting with the way the climate is shifting. So the scientists can use all of this data to just kind of keep track of what's going on. All right, all of this becomes a part of the permanent record for the scientists to use. So here's what we do to take care of the count. So what we want to do is make sure that all of the people in the community that are participating do their counting in the same way. So that is kind of a quality check on the data so that the scientists can rely on the information that you're providing. So the minimum that you're supposed to count for is 15 minutes. You can count as long as you want, but it should be a minimum of 15 minutes. And you want to keep track of your time so that you know how long you've been doing it. And you want to make your best estimate of the number of individuals for each species that you see. So a lot of questions always come up with that. Well, how do you know if an individual is the same one you've seen before? It went to the feeder, it went away, it came back. The way we account for that is you make a record of the most number you see of that species at a time. So for an example, if you see a Carolina wren, which is this picture, on your feeder or on the ground underneath your feeder, it flies away. And then, a few minutes later, a Carolina wren appears again. You don't know if that's the same individual or a different individual, but it still is only one. Now, if a second Carolina wren comes flying in and you can see two at once, then 2 is the number that you report. So you want to see the greatest number that you see all at one time. Now, for some species that are dimorphic, like cardinals, when you can tell the difference between a male and a female cardinal because of the color, if you see a male cardinal at your feeder and it leaves, And then a female cardinal comes in, you still only see one bird, but you know that those are not the same bird because they look completely different. So then you can report two. But that's the only time when you would be reporting something other than the number that you see at once, when you can clearly see because of dimorphism that they are two individual birds. Hope that's clear. If it's not, you can ask questions. So every time you count, we want to do a new checklist. So for example, if you decide on Friday morning, tomorrow morning, that you're going to do a count for 15 minutes, great, you do a checklist. Then you, at lunchtime, you're sitting at your kitchen table, you're eating lunch, and you look out at your feeder and you go, oh my goodness, look at all those birds. And you want to count again, that's great. You want to do a new checklist for that time, because even though it's the same place, it is a different time. So that's a new checklist for the same place, but a different time. If you then decide, okay, well, now I'm going to go over to Bucks Audubon and see what's going on over there, you would again start another checklist because now you've got a new location. So every time you have a new day, a new location, or a new time in the same location, you want to start a new list. Okay, so this is going to be how you actually do it. All right. If you have an account with Cornell, if it's Feeder Watch, Nest Watch, or Ebird, that's the login that you're going to use. If you haven't participated since 2013, you're going to want to create a new account. It's free to do. It doesn't take more than a couple of minutes. All you really need is an internet connection and an email address, and you can create an Ebird account. All right. So when you're going to sign into your account, and what you're going to do is you're going to you're going to start asking a bunch of questions. First thing you're going to do is identify where you are. So you can choose your location. If you already have an Ebird account, you probably have your home location sorted. If you haven't had an Ebird account before, you can enter your location by looking at a map. You can use Find It on a Map. You could enter a region, you could enter Pennsylvania, you can enter the town. And so then you can just scroll through the questions until you find your location on a map, and then you can go ahead and hit enter. All right, so this is one of the ways you can start looking through a map. So for example, if you entered New York, it'll come up with, a map of New York State, and then you can, enter your address, and it'll zoom into your address, and then you can go right on ahead. Okay, the next thing that comes up, and this is, the slides I'm showing you are what you would see if you were going to be putting your data in on, say, a desktop or a laptop computer. This is not the mobile account. There's also a mobile app that you can put on your smartphone. It's very similar, but it's slightly different. But this is similar enough that you could make sense out of it. So the next thing you do is date and effort. So you can see here the observation date is what you're going to want to put in, and then what kind of observation you're doing. All right. So you have a choice. If you're going to be taking a walk, you'll use traveling. If you're going to be sitting looking at your feeder, it'll be stationary. If it's data that you've collected from long ago and now you want to put it in your Ebird account, that would be historical. And if it's something completely different, you're out walking your dog, or you're on your way to the grocery store and you see a bird that you want to make a record of, that would be an incidental record, because that's your intent was not to be birding, but you did see a bird that you want to make sure is captured. That would be an incidental recording. Then you put in your start time, whether it's AM or PM, or you have the option of using a 24-hour clock if you like the military system, how long you birded for, and how far you walked, and how many people were participating in your counting. All right, so that takes care of this screen. And now we're into the actual sighting of the birds. So the list that will come up will, it looks like, oh my gosh, how am I ever going to find my bird with all of these birds listed on the left? Well, that's not what you want to worry about. You want to go over to where it says jump to species, where that bright yellow arrow is, and put in a number, or put in a species. So you want to come over here. If you say, you type in cardinal, then it'll come up with cardinal, and then you can put in a number. When you're using the app on your phone, you start with the number, put in 2 and hit space, and you'll come up with your alphabet again, and you can start typing in cardinal, and it'll drop down to cardinal, and then you highlight cardinal and hit enter, and that's all you need to do, and then your bird is now entered in your list for the day. Okay, so do your count, carry on. If you are worried about your ability to identify something, and you're concerned that you might be making an error, you don't really need to worry about that, because if you're entering something that Ebird thinks is unusual for where you are, it will start asking you questions about it. So for example, in this example, they saw 500 gray legs cross swan geese. And it asks you a question. It says, that was something that we didn't expect to see. It's a high count. So please enter some comments about why you think this is right. So you've got a place to add your details, you put in some text, and you'll go through this, as they come up. If there's any questions, you can just go ahead and hit complete when you're done. All right, so then carrying on. When it's time, at the bottom right there, you'll see, is this a complete checklist? That question really means, are you entering all of the birds that you were able to identify? And you want to say yes, and then you can hit submit. And that gives you a complete checklist. Now, some of the questions that come up about identifying birds, for example, what if I only hear the bird? Like, you heard a pileated woodpecker laughing in the woods. And, a pileated woodpecker has a very distinctive call. You're absolutely certain it's a pileated woodpecker. That's fine. That is a good enough identification of a woodpecker, a pileated woodpecker, and you can go ahead and enter that as one pileated woodpecker. Doesn't have to be a bird that you saw. You were able to identify it by its call, and that is absolutely good enough. So after you submit that, you can review, you can edit it. If you were with a group and other people want a copy of the list, you can share it. And then, of course, if you want to keep birding, you can go ahead and start on another list. One of the reasons you might want to do another list immediately is because you're changing what you're doing. For example, on Saturday, when we do our actual in-person count, what I typically do is stay at the visitor center for the first 15 minutes. So that would be a stationary count. There's lots of birds that come to the feeders that are close by the center. We'll count those for 15 minutes, and that'll be one list. We'll go ahead and submit that list, and then we'll start on a traveling list where we start to walk around the property and look for other birds that might not be going to feeders, that might be, in a different type of habitat, not so close to the building, more out in the fields or in the woods, or even, on the pond. Although the pond is frozen now, so I don't know that we're going to get a whole lot of waterfowl there because there's not very much open water left. But so we would start a second list, even though it's the same day, it might be the same group, but now it's becoming a traveling list, not a stationary list. All right. So a couple of things to add to this. There's a whole lot of resources out there to help you with identifying birds. I told you about the eBirds Essentials course for when you want to start using eBird. Those were all the pictures that were submitted. But there's a number of different kinds of resources that are available to you. For example, for free, you can get a poster a downloadable poster of sparrows. Now, sparrows, are notorious for being hard to identify. So, for example, this particular list shows a bunch of sparrows that are considered to be widespread. When you're first learning about sparrows, a lot of people call them LBJs or LBBs, little brown jobs or little brown birds. But they're quite distinguishable, once you start to look for the particular things that make them unique. For example, down in the bottom right, the song sparrow, that accumulation of spots on its chest is very typical for a song sparrow, and that would identify it versus, for example, a chipping sparrow, which is up above and slightly to the left, which has a very clear breast. So you can get yourself a poster of this, of these sorts of sparrows, and start to learn them a little better. Similarly, there's some finches that can be very confusing. You can get another poster for finches. A lot of people, including myself, have trouble with house finches and purple finches. House finch is a little bit more of a raspberry color or a rosy color versus the purple finch, which is a little more of a raspberry color, at least when you're talking about the males. When you go down to the females, you can see that the purple finch female's got that white eye line, or eyebrow rather, right above the eye. So you can start, being able to distinguish between the closely matched finches using these free downloadable resources. And then, of course, there's your common feeder birds. There's another free poster that you can get that'll help identify, your common feeder birds. For example, a lot of folks also have trouble with the downy and the hairy woodpeckers. That's over there on the right. The key characteristic for me with these is the size of the beak or the bill. The hairy woodpecker, if you look at that, it's got a very long bill. If you were to say to flip that beak backwards, the beak is really as long as the head is wide. Whereas if you look at the downy that's down, below to the left a little bit, it's got a very short beak. If you flip that over, it just about maybe go just about past the eye, but certainly not nearly as long as the hairy woodpecker. Now, the hairies generally are bigger than the downies, but if they're not side by side, it can be hard to tell. So look at the beak. There's a couple of other interesting ones down there. The red-bellied woodpecker, which is just below the hairy. You can tell the difference between the male and the female by how much red is on the head. So these are all useful tools that we have to help you out with helping with your bird identification. But once again, the GBBC doesn't really care how good you are. If you can only identify one bird and that's the bird that you see, they still want you to report it. But because the scientists are going to be using this data, you want to be sure of the birds that you do in fact identify. So, okay, so here's some clickable links for where you can get those things. There's the link for the sparrow identification, the finch identification, and the feeder birds poster. Now, one more thing that I wanted to show you was this live submission link. When the Great Backyard Bird Count is going on, you can actually watch in real time the submissions from around the world. So this actually is live. It didn't used to be live all the time. It is now live all the time. And this is today. You can see the time is here. And every time someone submits a checklist.
That didn't open up for us, Diane.
It's not showing?
No, it's not showing.
Ah, it's showing perfectly for me. Okay, well, let me stop sharing and try it in a different way. All right. That's so disappointing. I love this. I love this screen. Let me try again. All right, can you see it now? Are your lights coming on? These are people submitting. Is this working?
Now.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. Yes. So every time someone submits a checklist, a little light goes on. And I can't, you guys are blocking my view, but up in the upper right, it shows you how many checklists have been submitted for the day. So this is, if you're a geek like me, this is fascinating. Some people think I'm crazy, but if if you're an eBird geek, it's fun to watch. All right. All right, so that was a fair bit of information in a short amount of time. So I'm gonna ask for questions. Is there anything in the chat that's questions? Good question about the Merlin Bird ID app. You can use the Merlin Bird ID app, however, you cannot enter the number in Merlin. Okay, if you want to use your Merlin Bird ID app to identify a bird, it will take that, it will put it into the Great Backyard Bird Count, but it won't let you enter the number. So if you saw, 20 white-throated sparrows and you use Merlin to identify the fact that it was in fact a white-throated sparrow, it'll accept white-throated sparrow into the Great Backyard Bird Count, but not the number. So it's really better to use the eBird app for that. All right, I see Stacy's putting in there. We have, yes, there's a number of Great Backyard Bird Count live links that we can share for people that want to chat with other birders and talk about the Great Backyard Bird Count and maybe even get some live help, at the time if that's of interest. All right. All right, so there must be questions because I went through an awful lot of information really fast. Phil's waving.
You're welcome to unmute yourself and ask questions. Okay. There's not that many of us on.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah, which I just learned, if you hold down the space bar, that unmutes you too, which is a quick way to do it. Yeah, I wasn't sure if we fill out the eBird during the bird count period of this Friday through Monday, will that automatically be considered part of the bird count, Great Backyard Bird Count, or do we have to click a different category to tell them that we're doing it for the bird count?
No, every submission to eBird during the time of the GBBC counts.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, they didn't used to connect like that. A few years ago, you had to, do two different things, but there was so much complaining about that they finally linked them up so that every time, there's an eBird list submitted during this weekend, it'll count towards the Great Backyard Bird Count. All right. Well, we advertise this as a 30-minute program. Our 30 minutes is up. If you've got questions, please, you can email me if you want. It's dianesmith@bcas.org. I hope to see some of you, if not all of you, out on Saturday at 2 o'clock. The snow is deep, so wear good boots because we're going to be traipsing through the snow. And again, it's, if you don't have an eBird account, I really, I can't recommend highly enough getting one. I used to keep my, my life lists in the back of my bird ID books, of which I have way too many now. And this is much easier to keep track of your birds, using eBird. Plus, it has the benefit of helping out the scientists with your sightings.
It's our website, I guess.
Oh, I wish I knew how to copy this.
Hey, Diane, if we look out the window for 15 minutes at our feeder and see the different birds, record that, and then a few hours later, look out the window again for 15 minutes, more than likely, though, we're probably seeing the same birds at the feeder, right? So should we be reporting that?
Yes, you should, because they use the time of day data as well.
Okay.
So the fact that they're, coming to your feeder, and they also will correlate what the weather is doing at your location at the same time. So, for example, my birds, when the snow is coming, my birds go nuts at my feeders. They just flock like crazy to the feeders, getting ready for the storm to come in. And the people that are using the data will correlate what the weather is happening at that time, and use that as part of the analysis that they do.
And then I'm always looking out the windows here, looking around, and most of the time I see the same birds at the feeder, but maybe once every few days, a a red-breasted nuthatch will show up. And instead of, would that be like an incidental that I drop it in there so I don't have to put all the time that I spent looking out the window at the other birds?
You can do that. Yep, you can drop that in as an incidental because you're not really spending the time watching birds. You just incidentally happen to see that red-breasted nuthatch. So yeah, that would be an
Right.
incidental sighting.
Good.
I have a question. We were a little late to join because I was having some email issues.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, me too. Are you recording this? I can't see if it's being recorded.
Yes, it is.
So we'll be able to check in from the beginning.
Yeah, absolutely. Stacy,
Okay, great.
when will it be up, Stacy?
Marissa's usually pretty fast. It'll probably go up onto the YouTube page tomorrow. But what I can do, we actually had a lot of people register that didn't come tonight. So what I will do is actually send out an email to everyone who registered with a link to the recording. And I will drop in some of these websites that we're putting here as well. So you have them.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Any other questions for Diane?
Well, just to thank you, Diane.
All right.
for
Well, listen,
doing
thank
this.
you all
Hopefully
very much for coming. And
see
I
you
really
Saturday.
hope you can get, I really hope everybody gets out there and counts at least once over the next 4 days. I know I'll be counting every day, at least once a day, to make sure that my birds get counted. So make sure your birds get out there and get counted.
Thank you very much.
All
Thank
righty.
you.
All right. Thanks for coming.
Everybody.
Stacy,
Yeah.
can you stay on after everybody else leaves? I wanted to update you on what happened today.
Absolutely.
Great.